For those of you whom I haven't met, I'm Bob Mintz, and I think that we have a very exciting topic for you tonight. We're talking about financial privacy and asset protection. And let me show you first what I mean by these terms. We'll create a general heading here called Preserving Family Wealth. And our goal is to protect what you have from a variety of threats. And the first threat might be called income taxes. And one of our goals is to reduce income taxes. And we do that by reorganizing businesses and minimizing and deferring taxes. And that's always one of our biggest concerns. Proper tax planning helps you to accumulate wealth faster and prevents you from wasting what you have. Next to that, we have estate planning, which is the second important part of the asset protection process. Most people want to avoid estate taxes and minimize or avoid a probate and reduce the costs associated with that and make sure that their property passes the way that they want it to go. The next issue in asset protection is called financial privacy, and we'll talk a lot about that in just a few minutes, but we'll start with the fourth, that's called lawsuit protection. And I'll talk about that, and let me start by giving you a little bit of the background in this. One day in 1986, a client came in and he was in the real estate business, and he said that he was about to develop a large condominium project out in Palm Springs, and his bank was going to put up about $20 million of the cost of that, and he stood to make $2 or $3 or $5 million if everything worked out well. But he wanted to know what would happen if things didn't work out, if all the condominiums weren't sold, or if interest rates went up. He wanted to know if there's any way to protect himself if something went wrong. He said, what happens if I can't sell the units? He wanted to know how he could protect his other assets, and his question was, how could he protect these other assets if something went wrong with the condominium project? And to me, that was a very interesting question. At the time, we'd never thought about the issue of asset protection before. There was nothing about it in law school. There was no books or articles written on the subject. And none of the other attorneys who we spoke to had any helpful suggestions about this. So we went to the law library and started researching whatever cases we could find, and different entities like partnerships and trusts and corporations. And over time, my partner and I developed the different pieces of an asset protection program, and within a few months it became 100% of my law practice. We've set up thousands of these plans now, so we have a good idea of the type of structure that works and which techniques have worked the best. What I like about asset protection and the practice is that it allows me to address matters that are of the highest concern to the clients. And these matters are, how do I protect my nest egg from the dangers and the threats that are out there from lawsuits, claims, or taxes? Those are everybody's biggest concern, whether their savings are $10,000 or $10 million. Everybody wants to hold on to what they have, and that's what asset protection is all about. If you have some money or some equity in your home or your business, then you should be aware of the situations that create potential dangers for you. Let's take a look for a second at business risks and what we call dangerous assets, and the threats which are posed and the solutions that we can develop to them. All business ventures and certain types of assets produce a potential liability that can exceed the amount of your investment. For example, you might expect that if you buy an apartment building with a $50,000 down payment, that's the amount that you can lose on the deal. When you think about it, you may think, well, you hope that it appreciates. But if everything goes wrong, then you might lose your $50,000. Well, what if the real risk was that you would lose not only your $50,000, but everything else that you've saved up? For example, an elderly client of mine owned two small apartment buildings in Los Angeles. And he collected the rents and he lived on the income from that plus the Social Security. And he even managed to save about $35,000 over a few years, which he decided to invest in a third building. And one day the upstairs tenant in the duplex which he bought had a few drinks, went up on the roof, fell over the railing, and suffered permanent brain damage, and he filed a lawsuit for $4 million. The insurance on the building was only $350,000, and the jury awarded $1.2 million in damages. So he ended up losing all 3 of his buildings. His investment of $35,000 in this case exposed everything else that he had to the liabilities associated with the property. Real estate, particularly rental property, is, whether it's commercial or residential, is the most dangerous type of asset that there is. Visitors get injured, tenants get injured, and you, as the landlord, are always held legally responsible. A liability can be created from the property which threatens not only your investment in it, but everything else that you have. In addition to real estate, every business is a dangerous asset. You have potential lawsuits from customers, from lenders, from suppliers, from your employees, as well as actions by whatever government regulatory agency is regulating your business. If you're going into business or operating a business, the questions that you need to ask are not only how much money can I make from this business, but also how much money can I lose. You always want to protect whatever savings you have in any equity and any other investments from the liability that's associated with your business. The same concerns arise if you're involved in any type of professional practice. If you're a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, you're in a risky profession, and the chances are high that you'll be involved in a lawsuit sooner or later. Lawyers are particularly fair game, and justifiably so, and they do poorly when put in front of a jury as a defendant in a case. Lawyers typically lose these type of cases. Although doctors are in a risky profession, typically when they end up as defendants in a case, they usually win the case, but they still have to go through the lawsuit. The bigger risk to doctors, rather than the liability from their practice, is the other investments that they typically make. We had a client who's a doctor who invested some money with his business manager, and they opened a restaurant together as partners, and within a few months the restaurant went out of business, and the doctor was stuck with the liability of 4 years remaining on the lease and unpaid payroll taxes. So you have to be careful of liabilities associated with any investments that you make. We'll talk about the specific strategies that we use for protection in a few minutes, but now we can see the benefits that we'd like to obtain from an asset protection plan. The first objective is to discourage any lawsuits before they begin. When assets are safely shielded and protected from claims, then the economic incentive to sue you is removed, and you become a less likely target. Secondly, if there is a lawsuit and you get sued anyhow, despite any precautions that you take, the second objective is to keep your property free from liens or attachments, which means that we don't want anybody to take your property from you either during or after a lawsuit. So the second part of the objective is shielding it from a potential judgment or an attachment lien during a lawsuit. Let me just tell you what I mean here for a second.